Hello and welcome to the Move Your Business Forward podcast. These talks are hosted by Boll, founder of Evoke Management and CEO of International Leaders UK. He'll be talking with experts from both these companies about issues that affect SME companies today.
Today, I'm joined by one of the advisory board members from International Leaders UK, Ian Filby. Ian has been a successful business leader, being in charge of DFS for around 8 years, and then doing a number of non-exec roles. So delighted, Ian, to have you here today on the Move Your Business Forward podcast. So thank you for joining me, Ian.
My pleasure, Rob.
Good. What I was keen to just pick your brain on today. Obviously, at the moment we're recording this, we're towards the beginning of 2023. There's a number of things going on, lots of uncertainty. We've got inflationary pressures, all kinds of issues around people trying to retain and attract best talent. For any business leader, there's lots of things going on at the moment, and there's always things going on, but particularly challenges around all that at the moment. And I thought it'd be good just to talk around from your perspective. What would you be advising any business leader to really be focusing their efforts on at the moment? What would be your top tips for any business leader where their focus should be in thought process? So thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, hey, look, gosh, so many different aspects to this, and of course, Rob, it always depends where you are within your sector. I mean, if you're currently the CEO of Shell, you're having a great time, you're putting in record numbers, and with looking forward to things probably being very positive, so you can be very bullish. But look, I think that an enormous number of businesses are faced with lots of challenges, with particularly their costs going up, and therefore will be feeling like they've got to tread water a little bit in terms of probably making commitments to expansion or capital spend or taking on more people. So I know we've sort of been through what feels like 3 years of treading water, and therefore maybe reflecting on the future. But we are where we are. And I think to try and use the next 12 months to really stand back and understand where your sector is going, what your relative competitive advantage is, and therefore exploring whether there are ways in which you should be focusing on where you make a difference in your sector, and therefore where you'll be able to generate profit. So it is an opportunity to take a sort of step back and really hone your strategy over the next 12-24 months. And I think any period of consolidation where you're doing that also enables you to reflect on things like you and I have discussed this many a time about how fit for you for purpose, in terms of, have you got yourself in a good place to lead an organization, and are you articulating a really good, strong, granular view of the future, and even better, are you co-creating that with your immediate team? So I think that's one area that I know you and I have talked about that I think could be really interesting to use this period in. And then I think just the second area that I'd reflect on is, we are struggling with people having left the workforce, whether it's early retirement, whether it's ill health, whether it's going back to Europe. And I think there's a big sort of call out there for getting talent, retaining talent, and then obviously that talent wanting to be paid more. So I think never a better time to think about how you add value to your team's experience of working with your organization. And that may get you into what you might personally feel are suboptimal choices around, working at home, being more flexible with your workforce, making them feel more motivated because they truly feel like they are part of the mission purpose of your organization and the values that you've got. So developing those with them. So there's just some reflections on, it's a really, really tough time, but it's probably also a time for opportunity.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's quite a lot there, Ian, and there's lots I can relate to. I just going back to thoughts around, assessing your market, your kind of your sector and an industry you're in. I think one of the learnings I've seen from looking at a lot of companies through the pandemic, that some had rapid growth and potentially unexpected growth, and others had, as you would expect, challenges. And I think people often seem to think these trends are just going to carry on. And I think at the moment, there's no new normal. I think the new normal is this unknown to an extent. And I think I've seen a number of investor decks. I've seen proposals for raising investment. And I've seen people with massive plans of, well, this is going to continue. And it's like, well, it can't. You might have had a lucky break because of your particular sector offering, which is fantastic. And that should be a nice profitable period for you. But somehow that's not going to carry on forever. And I think it's where to be realistic, because I think people are challenged with this. Well, what is the new normal in terms of my revenue, my customer trends, how my product's going to be taken and used, or my service, whatever it is. People are making different choices of how they spend their money, how they spend their time, and what they want to buy, and everyone's feeling the pressure on them. So any thoughts as to how to really, it's almost like that balance of short-term view and then realistic long-term view, which I think is a real struggle for many companies right now. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you make a really good point. I mean, let's look at made.com. Everybody's darling float a year ago and bankrupt within, into administration within a year. And it was just the very, very issue you've just been talking about, Rob, really, which is, online had a huge surge during the pandemic. And I don't think many, a number of people in that sector, as in online, sort of were honest with themselves how much they were getting a fillip from a necessity as opposed to accelerating what had been a consumer trend. And the truth is somewhere in between. So I don't know that enough people really built in the fact that there was going to be a bit of a drop back for the majority of online players. And notwithstanding that it will still continue to grow going forward in time because it's a societal trend. So, the point you make, therefore, is really important, that you must really try and understand your customers' behavior. So rather than just sort of thinking a glib assessment is everything's going to be rosy going forward, if you are enjoying a good surge, really make sure you understand right at the grassroots level what consumers, what choices they're making. That mean, consumers could also be other clients if you're in business to business, why they are doing what they are doing now and how sustainable that is, or what reasons, they may suddenly hold back on their behavior. I think that's, and it goes to another principle that I've found amazing in business. Most businesses say they understand their customer, know their customer really well, and really customer focused. In my experience, when I've gone in there, they really, in truth, spend very little time really asking hard questions of their customers, consumer, whatever, to truly understand their behavior and therefore why their product, hopefully their point of difference, really matters to those people and whether that is going to sustain.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And one of the things I think can be a challenge with kind of setting realistic growth scenarios is communicating that to whether it's your shareholders or investors. I think a lot of companies are having to go and revisit investors and ask for more money just to because of what's going on or what's happened. It's kind of stakeholder management, isn't it? You're the leader of the business. You've got to manage your internal team. You've probably got to push your sales and marketing function, but again, be realistic. There's no point in pushing for results that never happen and having almost a depressed or or deflated team. The whole internal function's got to work well. So Ian, just thinking a little bit about stakeholder management, investors you're reapproaching for more money for further growth, or because you've got a cash flow issue, and then internally, I think there's these challenges about, you've got to show that yes, we're positive about growth, there's all this opportunity, but being realistic. And I think some of those stakeholders can be a little bit hard to please or convince you're on the right track. And then if you've got any thoughts as to how to best have those sometimes challenging conversations.
Oh, Robbie, I mean, what a super tricky area, and it depends who the stakeholders are, you know. And I think if they are, for instance, like a private equity, where they're probably really quite close to the business case, then it's strangely an easier conversation, because at least they come from a position of knowledge. They might not like what's going on, they might not like the outcome. So, but at least you're having a conversation based on everybody understanding what the business plan was, what the business case is, and the challenges it faces. And so, you know, and therefore, like everything, just be super well prepared and make sure you take them back to the drivers of the business case, you know, and therefore to help them have a realistic, or help them come to with you a realistic expectation of how one would have to adapt to, you know, maybe a huge cost increase in, you know, one of the elements of your business. Yep. You know, at the moment, I believe a lot of the hospitality industry is still enjoying, partly because they've inflated their retails, they're enjoying good top lines. But, you know, the costs have just gone so out of kilter of food and labor that a great top line is not at all translating into a very healthy bottom line.
Yeah.
You know, so that'll be a good example of, you know, kind of whereby you just have to really in detail explore how much the plan has probably changed on the top line and the cost, as an example. You've got other problems where maybe your investors are more distant, like sort of, you know, as a listed company where those investors hold many, many shares. And that's super tricky, because they're not very close to it and therefore just don't like bad news. So again, you know, really, really trying to get a narrative that they can relate to their everyday experiences and other businesses, so they can sort of put some correlations, and demonstrating you really understand the drivers of maybe what's going wrong with your top line or particularly cost line, or why your customers are changing behavior, and that you have a plan, but maybe a plan that doesn't get them to where they want to be. Those are probably the two sort of different ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah, no, that's really useful, Ian. And again, it's not an easy thing to approach. And I think a lot of leaders of companies struggle with either it's overcomplicated or not going back to those fundamental principles which are going to drive the business, and explaining, well, this is how we think we relate to those. And it comes from those investors, even talking to a bank about, you know, further credit that might be required. And I think for, you know, some of the companies that I'm working with aren't going to be listed. They might have crowd investors, and there's lots of those people that sometimes think they know everything and are going to be wanting to contribute or have an idea. And I think having clarity in your message to them, and again, bring it back to the simple things and relating it to
probably with crowd investors, probably even more important, Rob, you know, because they're probably another level of distance, and so therefore they kind of almost need what I call the elevator test. You know, don't give them all the sort of ups and downs, so they kind of get lost in, you're trying to demonstrate you understand all the drivers, but they get lost in the relative importance of all of them. It's almost like you got 30 seconds to give the simple version of what's happening and what you're doing and what the outcome's likely to be.
Yeah, and again, I think communication is key, isn't it? Internally and external things. And I think it's just keeping it consistent and being slightly, you know, just trying to be honest about what we're seeing and what we're trying to deal with makes a lot of sense. The other thing you referred to is talent, and this is a massive thing. So whether it's recruiting the best people or retaining the best people, we're nowhere. Yeah, it's always going to be an issue, and I think there's different generations that have different career perspectives in how long they want to be in a role or even a business, and even a type of role, do this and then go off and do something completely different. So I don't know if you've got what your top tips would be for anyone now thinking, right, how do I make sure I'm retaining my top talent, engaging them? What would you encourage any leaders to be doing right now?
It would. I think you just used the word engaging them, and I think you've heard me already mention it earlier. It's there's so many aspects to why people came on, and clearly, if you don't give people a fair wage at all for what they're doing, you're always going to keep yourself vulnerable. But just sort of being at the high level when somebody else may always sort of tip you for a bit more means that you have to think about how sticky have you made yourself with that individual, and an individual feeling that they've been part of creating where the business is going and its purpose and its values. It sounds like all those kind of glib words, but you can turn these things into things that are very tangible in everyday English as to why people believe that they're part of an organization that is in some way making a difference. It might not just be the business, it might be the charities that you support, it might be how you help community, it might be how you are seen to be creating an inclusive organization and playing your part there. So there's a number of elements, plus just that good old-fashioned thing of, do people enjoy working around the other people that are in the organization or in the office when you're in the office. So I think I couldn't underestimate the focus that you need to place on people truly understanding the journey they're on, and that they feel that they're part of something that cares for something that matters, is really important. And then just recognizing the flexibility. I've bumped into a few business leaders recently. They're going, right, I put my foot down and it's everybody back in the office for 5 days. Well, maybe they'll be lucky. Maybe they're in a sector where that won't have an impact. And I can really understand why they are saying that from one dimension, but it doesn't work for the whole talent pool or every individual. So they could be groups of people, millennials, or even the Gen Zs, they probably want to be in the office more, but they also enjoy the flexibility of maybe having a day or two working at home in the mix. I've heard many of that generation talk about valuing that mix, and they are a group of people who feel like they're in demand and move around from organizations. So if you don't flex to them, don't be surprised if you start losing them. And then it could be, young mums, in the end, they've seen such an upside in terms of getting that balance between home and work. If you kind of just sort of try and discipline them back to a full-time in office approach, maybe some of that group, especially if there's a dearth of talent, they'll find another employer who is more flexible. So if you try and take these sort of autocratic positions without really understanding the elements of your workforce and what motivates them, don't be surprised if you might lose more people than you would like.
No, I think there's some valid points there, and I think many businesses, many leaders are just trying to get all this right at the moment. But there's the balance, isn't there, between what's right for those individuals to get the most out of them, but also what the business needs, and some of the other individuals what they need, because there's no point in having a certain type of person that wants to be in the office because they want to be with other people, but then everyone else doesn't want to be. You don't solve anything. So I think it's just having that ability to listen, engage, and be flexible, and offer what people want, and we'll find the new normal. I think that's really useful. Now, the other thing I thought we should just talk about before we wrap this up. You mentioned about kind of getting yourself as a leader in the right space, and again, your thoughts and top tips on that, because I think that's a super important thing, is getting yourself in the right mindset, physical space, and just being in the right position to make decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've talked about this a number of times, Rob. This for me is a huge area. I mean, I quite often try and illustrate it with I had a great career, very lucky, spent many years doing some really senior jobs, ending up sort of being trading and marketing director for Boots, who are fighting a real tough rearguard action on the high street against the grocers and the cut price drugstores. I looked after several thousand people. So lots of big jobs. But the biggest job I ever did was then when I got the privilege of running DFS as CEO. And it was the most accountable, responsible, worked originally with private equity, and then eventually we floated after 4 years. So I became a public company CEO, obviously open to scrutiny from the press and investors and the banks. And yet that last 8 years was strangely the least stressful probably part of my career, notwithstanding the fact I managed to do a couple of profit warnings in that time as well. And it was because I tried to live by an understanding of looking after myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, and understanding why I was trying to create my own personal wealth. I called them my 4 pillars, that sort of hopefully made me a calmer, more balanced person, therefore more in the mode of listening to the organization, my customers, my stakeholders, and doing the old thing of hopefully leading with the ratio. You've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, try and use them in that ratio. I hopefully did my best using my time to go out into the organization, into the city, into wherever my stakeholders were, do a lot of listening so that I could help the organization adapt to what all its stakeholders wanted. And so I just can't underestimate the value of being in good shape yourself, because if you're physically tired, if you're burning out, if you're trying to take all the woes and all the challenges of the organization on your own shoulders in any periods of stress or growth, simply my learning was you can't do it. And therefore, using all the things I've just described, looking after yourself and all those dimensions really quite proactively, and making sure that some of those things are what I call the rocks. Make sure you take your holidays, any personal commitments to family and friends, they're sacrosanct. Time you've put aside for physical exercise, those are the things that you've kind of got in there despite all the what may feel pressing issues that are around you. So by focusing on those, keeping in good nick, and making sure you've got the courage to have a good, strong team around you and make them accountable for things, and therefore not meddling in their accountability. It's really, really high quality delegation with clear parameters of where the freedom is and where it isn't, are some of the elements that I would encourage any leader to focus on, probably, or they sort of know it, but find the time to plan to do that stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's really useful, Ian. And I've heard you talk about these things from your perspective a few times, and I think it's really useful. And your 4 pillars there: the physical health, emotional, spiritual, and also just working out, what is your purpose for doing this and generating wealth as a leader, as a business owner, I think is super important. And just time reflecting on those things and just making sure you're in the best position to be able to deliver all those things. The analogy of, if you've got if your own kind of bottle of energy enthusiasm is empty, you're not going to be able to give much. So you've got to get that topped up with the right level of rest, sleep, thought and thinking. So I think hugely powerful. So Ian, thanks so much for your time for this. That pretty much wraps up our time for this. Any last remaining thought that you would, anyone listening to this, any remaining thought you'd give to anyone approaching the rest of 2023, looking for kind of wisdom and thoughts to encourage them to take their business to that next stage?
Yeah, never get too downhearted with one bad day.
Yeah.
It's I often used to say that there are many people always trying to bring you problems, and hopefully they hope that you'll solve them for them. And one of my learnings over time is most problems that people bring you, particularly if they bring it from their perspective, never turn out to be the real problem. And so do your best to try and understand it, but then seek to understand whether the root causes are really what people tell you, because you'll find that problems have a habit of evolving and having nuances. So yeah, try not to panic at bad news in the moment, and also don't be harsh on yourself. If you haven't done all those perfect things I described before, you've always got the next day to start again, and maybe that big problem that you had isn't quite the same that day, the next day, or the week after. So be kind to yourself, and never panic at the big problems that suddenly present themselves in the day.
Yeah, no, perfect. That's really useful advice, and I think I can resonate with that from time to time. I think it's there's another day tomorrow, and these things will resolve themselves to an extent, and then you can have a clarity around making decisions. Ian, I've really enjoyed talking to you for this, so thank you so much, and I'm sure
my pleasure.
Talking again soon. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like more information about the topics discussed in this podcast, then you can find us on our website at moveyourbusinessforward.com.